Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. We begin with the big diplomatic blitzkrieg planned by India. Now, New Delhi is counting on all the party delegation visiting different countries to set the record straight on why, where and how Operation Sindoor was conducted. 59 MPs have been handpicked for this operation, and they will be spreading the word on Pakistan being a terror state and an epicenter of terror, and why India had to hit those terror bases. The message is very clear that while there may be politics, there may be questions by the opposition. When it comes to Pakistan, we stand as one, in one voice and united as a country against terror. So MPs from all political parties are being briefed in groups to expose Pakistan. The first batch was briefed early in the day, and they will be leaving on for their assignment tomorrow to ensure every country gets the message on India's stand against terror.
I was able to introduce the committee to my colleague Sri Ravi Shankar Prasad, who will be leading the delegation that is going to Paris in 2 days' time. So that was also a good opportunity for him to say hello to them and for them to meet him in advance. However, this committee is still traveling and may not be back in France when Raviji gets there, but he will meet their colleagues and others in Paris. French delegation not just expressed solidarity, they use the word soutien, which in English means support. They express support for India at this difficult time.
It was developments as they happened. Pakistan DGMO called our DGMO and said, we want to call this off, we want a ceasefire. And our DGMO said, if that's what you are doing, we will reciprocate. You escalated, we reciprocated. You want to call it off, we reciprocate. But please do it seriously. That's all, and it was done. जो देश में राजनीति है, जो देश में हमारा अधिकार है, दायित्व है, वो अलग है. देश के बारे में बाहर जाकर जो बोलना है वो अलग है.
The main topic or the main message of this delegation to the entire world is fight against terrorism, zero tolerance against terrorism. Terrorism which is proliferating in the soils of Pakistan and spreading to India. Every time some of the other attack which is happening on India, and now it is not limited only to India, but it is spreading to the entire world. US also has suffered the same terrorism activities. UK also suffered, UAE has also suffered, some parts of Africa has also suffered.
वार एक तरह से 40 साल से देश झेल रहा है. हम लोगों ने हर एक समय एविडेंस दिया, चीज़ें दी, लेकिन जैसे चोर को कहा जाता है कि आप ही आकर के जांच कीजिए, उस तरह का उसका हरकत रहा है, वो खुद ही कराता है. अब एक न्यू नॉर्मल जो आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा है कि अब इस तरह का घटना होगा तो हम लोग भी जाके हिट कर सकते हैं, जो प्रूव करके दिखाया. तो और लार्जली ये चीज़ देना कि भाई टेररिज्म का जो रूट है, सिर्फ इंडिया ही नहीं, दुनिया में कहीं टेररिस्ट एक्टिविटी होता है, उसका कहीं न कहीं लिंक पाकिस्तान में निकल जाता है. तो इस चीज़ से भी सेंसिटाइज करना,
एक्सपोज करना पूरा पाकिस्तान,
पूरा जो, और ये कहना कि कोई ये टेररिस्ट ग्रुप कोई आइसोलेशन में नहीं आ रहा है. इनका पूरा पैटर्न जो है, पूरा फंडिंग, ट्रेनिंग, सारा का सारा पाकिस्तान आर्मी और वहाँ की सरकार करवाती है.
And joining me now from Boston is Max Abrams, a security and terrorism expert, author of Rules for Rebels. Max, before I come to you, let me just tell our viewers that Max also received an invitation to meet the Indian all-party delegation headed for the United States of America under the leadership of Member of Parliament Shashi Tharoor. Max, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. A very big moment for India, a very important one, a delegation being led by Shashi Tharoor. You'll be meeting them. What the focus for India is going to be terrorism. You are an expert on terrorism. Tell us exactly where India and Pakistan really stand and where are they positioned when it comes to this issue of terrorism emanating from Pakistan.
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to meet with this high-level delegation. I'm particularly interested in the subject matter as a student of both terrorism and India's security. So the main thing that I'm going to do is just listen I know that the delegation has important information to share, and I'm going to listen closely to learn from the delegation to better understand the conflict. I think that the United States in general is very much on board with India and India's response to the April 22nd massacre. Personally, I very much approve of the way that India handled the attack. It didn't, rush to counterstrike immediately. It had a very sort of reasonable, calculated response where the goal was to attrit the terrorist groups as well as to send a message to these groups that it cannot attack Indian civilians with impunity, that there will be costs to pay for perpetrating terrorism, as well as to communicate a secondary message to Pakistan that it cannot be a state sponsor of terrorism, or else India is going to respond in a very serious way, while at the same time being mindful not to needlessly escalate the conflict in such a way that it would spiral, mindful that Pakistan is also a nuclear power. And so
That's
I
right.
think that India did a really good job of balancing these tricky objectives.
Right, Max, but also the fact that these were terror targets. Now, India has been fighting terrorism and Pakistan has been a very, very difficult neighbor. Yet, what's your reading and assessment of DC's reaction to this entire conflict? Because instead of focusing on the fact that Pakistan has been the state sponsor of terrorism, the world has been focusing on de-escalation and why India should de-escalate rather than focusing on terrorism and Pakistan. It's not just the United States of America, it's the world. The reason why it seems that India has had to send these all-party delegations to various world capitals.
Well, I don't think that the delegation is going to find in any way a disagreement from the American audience. I think that India's handling of the terrorist attack was very exemplary. You are correct that oftentimes what happens is there's a horrible terrorist attack, and then the target country responds. And the international community's criticisms and concerns focus on the counterterrorism response rather than the terrorism which precipitated it. But I don't really see India getting criticized in this area, particularly because its counterterrorism response was very selective in its use of violence. It really focused on the terrorist camps and other military targets and spared the population. And that makes a counterterrorism response more popular around the world.
Right, Max, we just have very little time. So before I let you go, Pakistan is also sending a delegation. And Bilawal Bhutto Zardari could be in DC. What do you think is the kind of engagement that DC will accord to Bilawal Bhutto Zardari? And if it is at a very high level, how do you then read a comparison, a hyphenation of India and Pakistan?
Well, I can really only guess what that conversation will be like, but I suspect that Pakistan will try to distance itself from the terrorist attack on April 22nd. It will try to convince Washington that actually Pakistan is a strong ally when it comes to counterterrorism, and try to build that bilateral relationship with Washington, D.C. So I think that the message from India and Pakistan will naturally be very different. I've only been invited to be party to the conversation between the US and India, perhaps because I'm known for being pro-India.
All right, Max Abrams, thank you so much for joining us. This is an exclusive conversation with one of the first people who got an invitation to meet with the all-party delegation headed to the United States of America, led by Shashi Tharoor. A day after the US president announced that Russia and Ukraine peace talks at the Vatican is a great idea, the EU and Britain announced new sanctions against Russia on Tuesday without waiting for the United States of America to join them. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the Senate hearing was grilled over allowing leverage to Russia. He emphasized that there's no military solution to Russia-Ukraine war. Listen in.
In fact, to the extent that the Ukrainians have asked for anything additional, what they've asked for is air defenses, patriot units, which frankly we don't have. But we are working closely with our NATO allies. There are NATO allies that do have some batteries of patriot missiles that they could provide or transfer over to the Ukrainians to defend, for example, the airspace of Kyiv and other places. And we've been encouraging in that front and working alongside our partners there to get deliveries of some of these systems. As you can imagine, none of these countries want to give up their patriot systems either. But we can't make them fast enough, and part of the challenge we have in Ukraine is that munitions are being expended substantially faster than the ability of the broader West, not just us, but the West, to produce them. Now, that said, on the issue of Ukraine, here's what we can all agree on. There is no military solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement.
Russian troops shelled a residential area in Ukraine's Kherson with artillery, injuring 2 civilians on Tuesday. This non-stop Russian aggression defines Kyiv's skepticism about peace talks between Russia and Ukraine.
Peace is not possible now, only when they run out of resources and army manpower. They're ready to fight at least for this summer. Putin will stall for time, and that's it. He's very cunning and insolent person. I don't know, he's not a person or human. He knows how to talk to Trump and is just fooling the whole world.
The war in Ukraine is more than 3 years old. US President Donald Trump's enthusiasm over a possible peace talk between Ukraine and Russia at the Vatican met with cynic reservations of the European leaders.
I think we can say that yesterday's phone call once again confirmed that statements are being made by the Russian side. But so far, there is no evidence of declared intentions. He is still not prepared to make any concessions. He is only talking about a ceasefire on his terms. That is, on the familiar terms, such as not joining NATO, ceding the occupied territories, and much more. Vladimir Putin is obviously continuing to play for time, which is also very clear to see.
European Union defense ministers gathered in Brussels on Tuesday as the EU adopted new sanctions against Russia over the war in Ukraine. This 17th sanction package against Russia will target nearly 200 ships of its shadow fleet.
It takes 2 to want peace, it only takes 1 to want war. And Russia clearly wants war, whereas Ukraine wants peace. So in order to make Russia want peace, also we need to put more pressure on Russia.
Soon Moscow's tone too changed in response.
Immediately after the talks, Zelensky and his European buddies spoke in favor of strengthening the anti-Russian sanctions. Yet again, they started to sing the same old song about impossibility to trust Russia, which should be punished, as they put it, for the failure to obey the ultimatum demand for a 30-day ceasefire with the Kiev regime, and its European sponsors tried to present as a certain step forward settlement. Russia never responds to ultimatums.
It took 2 hours over the phone on Monday for the US president to get his Russian counterpart to agree to talk to Ukraine. Even then, he did not appear to secure major concessions from President Vladimir Putin.
Well, because I think there's a chance of getting something done. And if you do that, you can also make it much worse. but there could be a time when that's going to happen. Yep.
Do you have a red line in your head of what would cause you to back away? And
Yeah, in my head, but not something I'm going to announce. But yeah, definitely in my head I do, yeah.
As the invisible clock ticks closer to Trump's red line, will Russia and Ukraine reach an agreeable peace formula? Or will European meddling with further sanctions worsen the crisis? Bureau Report, India Today.
In a major development on the Gaza offensive, the UK government has acted against Netanyahu government with announcement of sanctions. The British government ramped up its criticism of Israel's military offensive in Gaza by suspending free trade talks and hitting West Bank settlers with sanctions. The move came as international pressure mounts on Israel following a nearly 3-month-long blockade of supplies into Gaza that led to famine warnings. Even the United States of America, a staunch ally of Israel, has voiced concerns over the growing hunger crisis. UK government freezes free trade agreement with Israel as Gaza crisis deepens with Israel's launch of fresh ground offensive. The Israeli ambassador to the UK was summoned to the Foreign Office to be told by the UK's Middle East minister that Israel's block on aid to Gaza has been indefensible. Listen in.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, end this blockade now and let the aid in. Regrettably, Madam Deputy Speaker, despite our efforts, this Israeli government's egregious actions and rhetoric have continued. I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. We will be reviewing cooperation with them under the 2030 bilateral roadmap. The Netanyahu's government's actions have made this necessary.
The new ground offensive launched by Israeli forces on Gaza has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in the war-ravaged enclave. United Nations reports 57 children have reportedly died from malnutrition in Gaza due to aid blockade imposed by Israel since March 2nd. And if the situation persists, nearly 71,000 children under the age of 5 are expected to be acutely malnourished over the next 11 months. UN expects more trucks to enter Gaza on Wednesday.
On your first one, around 100. Past experience has very clearly showed that the less aid you get in and the less there is properly distributed in Gaza, the more desperation rises. And that has several effects, predictable effects. One is that the insufficient supplies are at greater risk of being looted. Why does that happen? Because it's being sold. It is being sold on what some people call a black market. I prefer a market of desperation.
Under immense international pressure, Israel has allowed 5 UN trucks carrying humanitarian aid, including baby food, into Gaza. But that's insufficient. Women and children queued up to receive cooked food as the first few aid trucks entered Gaza on Monday.
It is totally insufficient. Of course, the Israeli army has been blocking access to all humanitarian aid to Gaza for almost 3 months. So much so that the people of Gaza, the children of Gaza, were starving, were thirsty. And for reasons of domestic policy, the Israeli government decided to reopen the door, to half open the door. It was already insufficient before this blockade.
But Israel has not stopped its armed aggression in Gaza one bit in all these months of aid blockade. Fresh Israeli strikes on Tuesday damaged a school-turned-shelter, resulting in casualties of women and children.
At 2:15 a.m., the enemy bombed this building with suicide planes on a number of displaced inside this shelter. From Abu Amsha family, about 8 children were martyred, with 2 women and father and son. They are civilians, not related to resistance or anything.
Injured and ill Palestinians in Gaza face desperate conditions as hospitals face a collapse in operational capacity, according to the United Nations. The fundamental gap between both parties stands in the way for any fruitful negotiation between Israel and Hamas to end this brutal war.
The rounds of negotiations that took place in Doha in the past couple of weeks unfortunately didn't lead us anywhere yet, because there is a fundamental gap between the two parties, which is one party is looking for a partial deal that might or have the possibility to lead to a comprehensive deal, and the other party is looking just for one-off deal and to end the war and to get all the hostages out.
As pressure mounts on Israel to stop bombarding Gaza and open the gates for smoother supply of international aid, Palestinian children in the enclave are the worst victims who stare at death from either starvation or fatal war injury. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
With that, it's time to wrap up this edition of World Today. But before we go, we leave you with the jokes cracked by US President Donald Trump on Monday. During a press conference, he said that Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed admiration for First Lady Melania Trump, stating that Russia respects her more than him. This was shared during the White House ceremony where he signed the Take It Down Act, an initiative led by Melania Trump aimed at combating deep-fake pornography. Listen into what he has to say. Goodbye and take care.
I want to thank Melania for your leadership in this very important issue. It's an amazing issue. America is blessed to have such a dedicated and compassionate First Lady. I would tell you she is very dedicated. In fact, if you look at just what I heard, Putin just said they respect your wife a lot. I said, what about me? No, they like Melania better. That wasn't good. I don't know if that was good. I'm okay with it. I'm okay.